Federation year 52871. Gu'undar was a simple grundle. He had pursued the traditional trade of his people for many centuries, seeking out the vast riches of the Cygnus Orion Spur. Mining asteroids, drilling deep into the cores of planets, or even farming exotic resources in the depths of gas giants. Since the rise of the grundle on their home world, the species had an insatiable lust for materials of all sorts, from the precious metals of the ancient past to the more esoteric rarities of the modern age. Perhaps this fascination with mining had contributed to their short, stocky physiology. As a whole, grundle are short for bipeds. They average at 2/3 the height of bipeds in the known galaxy, with forearms and wide chests. Omnivores by nature, and like all civilized races, refused to eat the flesh of sapient beings. But at that moment, Gu'undar wished his people were obligate carnivores. At least then he'd have an excuse to shut up the blithering idiot, wasting time on the floor of the Federation Hall. For Gu'undar was not on a mining expedition, excavating the untold riches of the galaxy. Nor was he in a state-of-the-art manufactory, producing ever more exotic forms of matter. No, Gu'undar, as reward for his diligent service to the grundle people, had been chosen to be his species' representative to the Federation. The grundle had been one of the founding members of the Federation, and had Gu'undar cared to examine the exhaustive records of his people before assuming his post, he would have known of the vital role his people played in galactic politics at that time. But he didn't care, as he saw the posting as more ceremonial than anything. Gu'undar stretched his upper limbs, feeling the stiffness in his ancient bones. He swept his beady eyes around the council room, amused by the simplicity of the decor. The Federation, colloquially known as the Galactic Federation by modern races, was the pinnacle of power in the Milky Way galaxy. Primarily composed of species in the Cygnus Orion arm, it had grown to include members, associates, and protectorates in all corners of the galaxy. Species clamoured to be part of the Federation, whether for technology, military protection, or commerce. And yet, meetings between the representatives of the member nations were not held in a grand, ornate room. They were held in a simple Senate building on a highly populated planet in the Cygnus Orion arm. The room itself was panelled after an organic tree. Gu'undar couldn't place the species immediately, but it was one of the more common trees the galaxy over. The official members of the Federation sat in a semicircle of raised sets, with the senior species, such as the grundle, elevated towards the centre. In the middle was an elevated seat set towards the back of the room, cast in permanent shadow. As far as Gu'undar knew, the seat had always been empty. But it was not his fellow council members, nor the client and protectorate states that ringed the room that caused Gu'undar so much annoyance. No, the source of his displeasure was the aggravating representative currently standing in the middle of the room, prattling on before the council. Gu'undar turned his baleful gaze upon the being, quickly using his implant to recall what up-and-coming whippersnapper this was. After a few moments he had it. A representative from the Jaquel Imperium. An aggressive, militaristic, xenocidal empire that had sprung up in the depths of the Perseus arm. They had absorbed or annihilated most of their neighbours, only stopping when encountering the outer edges of Federation space. Gu'undar sighed and unmuted his translator, deciding that the mindless prattle of the bird-like Jaquel was preferable to boredom. The translator faithfully reproduced the haughty, high-pitched whine of the figure. The Galactic Federation has no right to inhibit the rightful expansion of the glorious Imperium. The zeal in the oversized chicken's voice was unmistakable, as was the fanatical fire in their eyes. I demand that you cease protecting the treacherous cowards who occupy rightful Imperium space. These snivelling wretches inhibit the expansion of the glorious Imperium, and we shall not be denied any longer. Gu'undar snorted to himself. The Jaquel saw every neighbour as being in the way, and either subjugated or exterminated them. Before he even had to act, one of his fellow councillors cut off the continuing rant from the self-important idiot below them. No. Silence. Wonderful, blissful silence. Gu'undar almost shed a tear. The plumped-up idiot below him actually staggered at the words, blustering and failing to compose himself. The feathers on his head and spine shot straight up as his agitation grew. Excuse me? What did you just say? The Jaquel had a fire in his eyes, and his voice had risen to a shrill, almost inaudible pitch. Again, the voice echoed in the room. I said no. Now get out of here and stop wasting my time. Guundar looked around, trying to locate the source of the voice. As amusing as it was to watch the jackal nearly explode with rage, he was more curious who was willing to bear the full ire of an Imperium. The Federation was ancient and powerful, sure, but most of its member states, including his own, hadn't fought a war in millennium. The jackal, now thoroughly enraged, darted its slitted eyes around the room. Who? Who would dare deny the Imperium? Who would dare defy me? I would. Guundar nearly jumped as he realized a being he had never seen before was stepping down the stairs next to him, approaching the floor where the infuriated jackal had been prattling on. The being was bipedal, mammalian. Average height for that type of being in the galaxy, 7 feet tall. The being appeared elderly, with long stark white hair stretching down its back, as well as a braided white beard stretching down from their face. The being used a long stick for balance, assisting his 2 legs. Guundar's implant immediately identified the device as a cane. The Grundle rumbled thoughtfully. Who was this being? And with the medical knowledge of the Federation, why did it need something as archaic as a cane? But as the being ponderously reached the bottom of the stairs, stepping onto the council floor, the room went dead silent, and Guundar realized where the being had come from with a growing sense of dread. He looked at the stairs, then looked behind him. The only seat higher than the Grundles was the head of the Federation itself. He whipped back to the events unfolding below, a growing anticipation in his heart. And just who are you? I've never seen you before. Some unimportant forgotten species cowering in the darkness? Well, identify yourself. The jackal rattled off the questions in a barrage, while its clawed hands twitched with restrained violence. The old man reached the floor with a sigh, leaning on his cane as he evaluated the jackal. Guundar couldn't see it, but the man smiled. A cruel thing that never reached his ancient eyes. You come into the venerable hall, interrupt my rest with your useless prattle, and you don't even know who I am. The man's voice is smooth and filled with an unsettling ancientness. Tell me, child, what is the name of this august body you have been making demands of? The jackal responded in its signature superior tone. The Galactic Fed... Before it finished, the first word the man roared. Wrong! Many in the council chamber flinched at the word, and the jackal took a step back at the venom, at the hatred in the voice. Had you simply made demands like every other upstart in the past, I wouldn't have bothered to interrupt my rest. But one thing I can't stand, that my people can't stand, is being forgotten. The room seemed to grow heavy, like an invisible pressure was descending upon it. The man's voice grew lower, a barely restrained fury in his voice. You come into my hall, make demands of my federation, threaten all of its members, including my people, and you don't even know who I am? With each declaration, the figure stepped closer, tapping his heavy cane on the ground with a ringing clink. The jackal's face begins to pale as the figure approaches, the weight of files on the beam before it overloading his implant. It squawks in a panicked voice. You're a Terran! Invisible to Guundar, the ancient Terran gives the jackal a wolfish smile. That's right, I am. I am the representative of my people to this federation, the Terran Federation, and it's time you newer races were reminded of an important lesson. The jackal makes a last attempt at blustering its way out, feathers extended as it sneers at the ancient Terran. And what lesson can the glorious Imperium learn from an ancient, irrelevant species? The next words were delivered in a whisper, but audible to the silent room. Fuck around and find out. After that, the jackal representative had left in a huff, swearing retribution upon the Federation, and upon humanity specifically. The Terran representative just watched them go, an amused glint in their eyes. Guundar watched the ancient being ascend the steps back to its chair, unnerved by his calm acceptance of the threats of the Imperium. He turned his squat body as the old Terran went past, and thought the figure looked vaguely familiar. He assessed the archives, searching for footage of the Terran representative. He grunted at the weight of the data, and filtered by date of first appearance. Guundar's blood froze, as he looked at the timestamp on the ancient video. Federation Year 1. And in it, along with one of his ancestors and several other ancient species, was the very same Terran who had just walked past him. Younger, with short dark hair instead of the ancient white, but the same Terran. He looked up in horror as he saw the words in the video displayed above the chair the Terran had returned to. They simply read, "The Terran Federation."